Howdy again everyone, and let's get straight down to reviewing the living daylights out of this impressive looking monster, the new Nikon Z 50mm f1.2s. Canon, Nikon and now Sony are all offering these large premium 50mm lenses on their respective mirrorless systems. I've already tested Canon's version and it's my aim to cover all three eventually. Nikon's offering costs $2,100 or £2,300 here in the UK, so it's slightly less expensive than Canon's alternative and slightly more than Sony's. I'd like to thank Nikon UK for loaning me a copy of this lens for testing for a couple of weeks, although as usual this is a totally independent review. Like the rest of Nikon Z lenses, it is only for Nikon's Z mount mirrorless cameras. Now, this could turn out to be one of the most professionally useful lenses on the Nikon Z system, especially if its image quality is up to standard. That standard 50mm field of view is so useful on a full-frame camera, wide enough to keep your background somewhat in play, but tight enough to get you a good little emphasis on your subject. f1.2 lets in plenty of light, about 33% more than an f1.4 lens, so you'll be able to easily shoot indoors or in other darker situations. And unlike its far more expensive, bigger cousin, the 58mm f0.95 Noct lens, it does have autofocus. Now, the first thing you notice about the lens is how enormous it is. I'm pretty sure this is the biggest f1.2 lens I have ever handled, and it weighs a bit too, just over a kilogram. That's probably because it's jam-packed with 17 glass elements, including 3 aspherical elements, an incredibly complex formula for a 50mm lens. It doesn't feel too front-heavy though, so it will balance nicely on your camera. At the rear of the lens, we see a weather sealing gasket, and just in front of that, an auto manual focus switch and a customizable control dial. You can set it in your camera to control your aperture, your exposure compensation, your ISO sensitivity, or you can disable it altogether. I have to criticise the placement of this control dial and its lightness to turn. I found myself accidentally turning it all the time, so I just turned it off altogether in the end. In front of all that comes another function button and another of Nikon's gimmicky but still pretty cool OLED displays, which you can set to show you your aperture or your focus point. Then comes a generously sized rubberized manual focus ring. It turns very responsively with your lens's focus motor. The lens shows only slight focus breathing as you focus in and out, as you can see here. The lens's autofocus motor is reasonably fast, nice and accurate, and it makes a quiet whirring sound as it works, but unlike Canon's equivalent lens, it doesn't make any clunking noises as it starts and stops. At the front of the lens is a rubber ring which is fixed in place and does nothing at all. It comes with a decent sized plastic lens hood that snaps positively into place. Its filter thread size is a large 82mm wide. Overall, the build quality here is excellent. It feels lovely and solid with great electronics. More importantly though, let's check out its image quality. I'm testing it here on a Nikon Z7 camera with its full frame 45 megapixel sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on. In the middle of the image, straight from f1.2, we see blazingly good image quality, razor sharp with excellent contrast. The image corners look a little hazier than the middle in both sharpness and contrast, but still at f1.2 on a full frame 45 megapixel camera, this performance is very impressive. Stop down to f2 for a nice general improvement in those corners, and at f2.8 and f4 we see really excellent sharpness there now, just as good as the middle. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, although f16 looks a little softer due to the effects of diffraction. Overall, it's an excellent performance here, although if you want the best quality in the image corners, you should stop down the aperture just a little. Something to take note of is a complete lack of chromatic aberration of any kind in this lens's images, even at f1.2, not even a hint of purple fringing here, which is very reassuring. Now let's look at distortion and vignetting. These images are taken with in-camera corrections turned off. The lens projects no real distortion here, At f1.2 though, vignetting is quite heavy, unsurprisingly, and that corner darkness falls broadly into the image frame. At f1.4, f2 and f2.8 we see good corner brightness emerging, so it's an average performance for vignetting, but a very good one for distortion. Let's take a look at close-up image quality now. The lens can focus down to a rather average 45 cm, not especially close. At f1.2, close-up image quality is a little softer than at normal distances, but still pretty good. Stop down only to f1.4 for a little improvement, and f2 to see excellent sharpness returning. The lens's performance against bright lights is better than average. When bright lights are in the picture, we only see very soft flaring and just a touch of haziness, nothing too disturbing. Let's take a look at Coma Levels now. At f1.2, bright points of light in your image corners show a little smearing with a little purple highlighting to it. f1.4 looks the same, but at f2 it's cleared up quite quickly, so it's a better than average performance there too. And now onto the very important question of the quality of this lens's bokeh. I'm pretty impressed, to be honest. It's some of the smoothest I've ever seen on a 50mm lens, resolving even very difficult backgrounds nice and softly. You do get the typical cat's eye bokeh shape in the corners at f1.2 though, but even then it looks soft and subtle. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration, the curse of almost all 50mm lenses. This Nikon optic shows surprisingly little of it, with only a hint of green and purple colour fringing on bokeh highlights at f1.2. Stop down to f2 and it's completely gone, so it's a great show there. Overall, well, I'm happy to present a glowing report for this expensive 50mm lens. The worst I could say in any image quality category is that the lens is better than average, and in terms of sharpness and quality of bokeh, it's truly excellent. It's particularly free of colour fringing, both lateral and longitudinal, leaving you with exceptionally clean images straight out of the camera. When compared with the Canon RF equivalent lens, which costs slightly more, the Nikon lens has much nicer feeling build quality and very slightly smoother working autofocus. When it comes to image quality, I would say that the Canon lens shows just a tiny bit more contrast in its image corners than the Nikon at f1.2, but the difference would be so small you could put it down to sample variation or human error in testing on my part. Considering that the Nikon lens costs a bit less as well, it's a slightly better lens overall, I would say. So there you go, all you conspiracy theorists, I'm not a Canon fanboy after all. Whatever the particularities, the Nikon Z 50mm f1.2s is still a very expensive piece of kit, but for the near perfection and sheer usefulness that it offers, it does have to come highly recommended. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It really is my pleasure to put these reviews together for everyone. If you find them helpful, then please feel free to check out my Patreon page, where you can find all kinds of exclusive content and videos and sneak previews for anyone who'd like to support the channel for only $3 a month. It's not just about increasing my personal beer fund, it really does make a real difference to keeping these tests going. Take care now.